for joining us.
Thank you so much. All right, so we'll get started. As Kelly said, I'm actually a Maddie's research fellow at Arizona State University, and I do my research in the Canine Science Collaboratory. And so my research focuses on improving the lives of dogs in animal shelters. So when we think about it, fostering is sort of the ultimate human-animal interaction intervention. And it's something that's been studied quite a lot in the animal shelter, taking dogs out for short little breaks and bringing them back in. But interestingly, there's not a lot known about how fostering, actually spending time with people out of the shelter, would improve shelter dog welfare. But if we think about it, it's possible that if we get the dog spending more time with people, that would be in a home, and getting out of sort of the chaos of the shelter environment, it's likely that it could have a good effect. And so to understand more about this effect of leaving the shelter temporarily, we worked together with 5 shelters across the country to learn more about the benefits of sleepovers or temporary fostering. So 1 or 2 nights out in a foster home. And so see here, we worked with a collection of shelters across the country. So we worked with Best Friends. We worked with Arizona Humane Society here in Phoenix. We worked with Humane Society of Western Montana, Lifeline Animal Project in Decatur, Georgia, and ICA of Texas in Dallas. And so how do we figure out, ask the dogs the question about the benefits of sleepover? And so how we did that was by collecting urine, which Kelly will take any questions afterwards about how we went about doing that. But so we collect urine to measure cortisol. And so I'm sure you've heard of cortisol. It's one of the hormones involved in the stress response of animals, including us. And why we pick urine is because, and you can measure cortisol a number of ways, but we pick urine because it's like a 2 to 4 hour window that it reflects upon. So that seems to be helpful in trying to understand what dogs are experiencing, not necessarily momentary stressors, but their overall sort of welfare. So we collected urine at 3 different time points. We collected urine before they went on the sleepover, during the sleepover, and then after. And if you know anything about cortisol, cortisol can be fluctuate during the day. So we made sure that we were collecting every morning at the same time. And so at Best Friends, when we started this study, we were just looking at 1-night sleepovers. And so we collected the morning before they went, the morning right before they came back, and then the following day back in the animal shelter. And then at all of our other shelter sites, we collected 6 time points. So that's 6 collections of urine. And so 2 days before, or 2 mornings before, 2 mornings after, and then 2 mornings back into the shelter. So what did we find? Well, when we looked at our results from Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, we found that just 1 night out significantly reduced the dog's cortisol levels, which is pretty great. But as you'll see from that day 3, their cortisol levels went back up to where they had started from before. They are a bit different between day 1 and day 3, but they're not statistically different because you'll see a lot of variation in that day 3. So going out was helpful, but it left us wondering, well, what happens when you stay longer? Is it possible that that stress would continue to go up, or would we see it just level or actually go back down? So that's the great thing about science. We can ask questions like this and worked with our other shelter sites. So what we'll see here at Arizona Humane Society is that we collected urine 2 days before, then they go out, and we see a significant reduction in dogs' cortisol levels on day 3 and day 4. And when they come back to the animal shelter, it does go back up, but not nearly, but nowhere higher than they were before. And we see this trend reported over and over again. We see it at Western Montana, that the dog's cortisol levels significantly drop and then go back up to where they were before. But in each shelter, the sleepover significantly reduces their cortisol with no sort of after sleepover increases. And I mention that because that was a big challenge for why we started this study in the first place. At Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, there were questions amongst the staff about, well, yeah, they go, but what happens when they come back? And I think that that's been a big sort of question for a lot of people about whether or not we let the animals go out temporarily and come back. Could it be more stressful? But I think what we see here is that when we're answering our primary research question about sleepovers and the benefits of sleepovers, we see that 1 to 2 nights of fostering significantly reduce cortisol without significant increases upon return. And so for us, I think that does provide a lot of support, that a sleepover gives dogs what we would call, a weekend. It's sort of like a weekend to your work week. It doesn't make all of the stress go away, but it helps the dogs rest and recharge and come back to the animal shelter a bit well rested. And actually in our data, when we looked at the dog's sleep, we actually found that the dogs were sleeping significantly longer when they were away on sleepover. And when they came back, they were actually sleeping more in the kennel than they were when they had left. And I think, again, it's a nice measure of how they're doing, their well-being, that we see reductions in cortisol and increases in sleep while they're away. And those sort of benefits of sleep continue after the dogs return. So I think that's probably about as much time as I get. So.
Okay.
And I'm happy to take any questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I've got one here. Do you think the results would be similar if you were evaluating dogs who were in foster care for longer periods of time, like a week or a month?
I think that's a great question and something that we're interested in. So one thing that I didn't mention is that I'm a Maddie's research fellow because we're embarking on a 3.5-year study, taking a look at understanding more about the benefits of all different types of fostering in the animal shelter. So things like field trips, sleepovers again, and longer term fostering of a week or longer. And so in that big part of the study, we're going to be looking at just outcomes for the animals. But in a small subset, in our welfare study, we're going to be asking the same exact question again about things like field trips and longer term fostering. So I think that we'll learn more about how these different types of fostering affect the well-being of the dogs.